Picture a snake so massive that if it crawled into your apartment and tried to walk through a doorway, it would literally have to squeeze through. Not science fiction, not a Hollywood monster. This was a real animal slithering around Earth 60 million years ago. Meet Titanoboa, the largest snake that ever existed on this planet. In this video, we're breaking down everything you need to know about it. We'll find out how it was even discovered, figure out what this thing actually ate, and uncover why one single species of snake became solid proof that Earth's climate used to be a completely different place. This story doesn't start in a jungle or a desert. It starts in a coal mine. At the Cerrejón mine in Colombia, one of the largest open-pit coal operations in the world, workers kept running into strange fossils. In the early 2000s, a team of paleontologists led by Jason Head and Jonathan Block showed up expecting to find remains of ancient crocodiles and turtles. Instead, they found vertebrae, a lot of vertebrae. So massive that one specimen was actually mailed to the Smithsonian labeled crocodile by mistake, and it took a snake specialist unwrapping the package to realize they were looking at something else entirely. Years of digging followed. By comparing the size and shape of these vertebrae to modern boas and anacondas, scientists were able to reconstruct the animal's rough proportions. The results stunned even the researchers themselves. About 43 feet long, roughly 2,500 pounds, with the largest individuals possibly stretching to 50 feet, longer than a school bus. For comparison, the modern green anaconda, the heaviest snake alive today, weighs around 100 pounds on average. Titanoboa outweighed it by nearly 30 times. And this is where one of the study's authors dropped a legendary quote. Paleontologist Jason Head once joked that if this snake slithered down the hallway of his building and decided to pop into his office, it would literally have to squeeze through the doorway. That's how wide its body was. At its thickest point, it was roughly the height of a human hip. That's not just a colorful exaggeration. It's basic math. To support a body that long, you need a matching diameter, or the whole structure simply collapses under its own weight. For the first several years after the discovery, scientists only knew Titanoboa from its vertebrae, basically just its spine. And based on its relationship to modern boas and anacondas, it was reasonable to assume this was a massive, land-based constrictor, the apex predator of its time, crushing and swallowing anything unlucky enough to cross its path. Giant turtles, early mammals, whatever it could get its coils around. That image, a monstrous ruler of the tropical forest, stuck around for years, showing up in documentaries and museum reconstructions everywhere. Then they found the skull. And this is where the real twist in the story kicks in. The shape of the skull and teeth wasn't what researchers expected at all. The teeth and jaw structure pointed toward a specialization for slippery, hard-to-grip prey, fish above all. Which means Titanoboa most likely lived a semi-aquatic lifestyle, spending a huge amount of its time in the rivers and swamps of ancient Colombia, rather than roaming the land hunting big game the way early reconstructions imagined. That doesn't mean it couldn't handle something large. Given its size, a massive crocodile-like predator, such as Acherontosuchus, was probably fair game if the opportunity came up. But its core diet was likely far more modest and far more aquatic than the monster that eats everything image that first made headlines. And here's something worth remembering from our very first episode. When we covered the rattlesnake, we talked about how its jaw unhinges and swings forward to strike. That's not unique to rattlesnakes. Nearly every snake on Earth has incredibly stretchy jaw ligaments instead of a rigidly fused jawbone, which is exactly how a snake half your size can swallow something wider than its own head. Now scale that same trick up to Titanoboa's size. A snake with a body as wide as a human hip, using that same stretched jaw mechanism, could theoretically have opened its mouth wide enough to swallow prey the size of a full-grown pig, whole, without chewing a single bite. The exact same biological trick that lets a corn snake eat a mouse, just scaled up to nightmare proportions. But the biggest twist in this whole story isn't about food at all. It's about temperature. Titanoboa was cold-blooded, which means its body size was directly tied to the temperature around it. The bigger a cold-blooded animal gets, the more outside heat it needs just to keep its metabolism running. Scientists calculated that for a snake this size to exist at all, the region would have needed an average annual temperature somewhere between 86 and 93 degrees Fahrenheit. noticeably hotter than the Amazon rainforest is today. In other words, the mere existence of Titanoboa became a living, or rather, a fossilized, thermometer for the ancient past. Before this discovery, climate scientists assumed the tropics 60 million years ago looked roughly like they do now. One giant snake forced everyone to redo the math. It's worth talking about the cultural impact this find had, too. In 2012, the Smithsonian built a full-scale model of Titanoboa and put it on display for several days right in the main concourse of Grand Central Terminal in New York City. 48 feet long, so people could actually feel the scale of the animal instead of just reading a number in an article. That same model later toured museums across the country as part of the Titanoboa Monster Snake exhibit. And even today, more than a decade later, the find keeps surprising people. Back in 2024, researchers in India described a species called Vasuki indicus, a snake that, by some estimates, may have come close to Titanoboa in length. But in terms of raw mass, total body weight, Titanoboa still stands unbeaten as the heaviest snake science has ever confirmed slithered across this planet. Since this snake's obviously long extinct, the question of, should you keep one as a pet, clearly doesn't apply. But here's the question worth asking instead. Could something like this happen again? Since a cold-blooded animal's size is limited by temperature, not some hard biological ceiling, in theory, sustained long-term warming could eventually recreate the conditions that once supported giants like this. This isn't a prediction, and it's definitely not a warning. Paleontologists aren't saying bus-sized snakes are coming back anytime soon, but the fact that temperature, not anatomy, was the real limiting factor on Titanoboa's size does change how you think about the link between climate and biology. And as always, a bit of context that tends to get lost behind the impressive numbers. Titanoboa didn't exist in isolation. It sat at the top of the food chain in one of the earliest known tropical rainforest ecosystems on Earth, one that formed just a few million years after the extinction of the dinosaurs. Living right alongside it in those same rivers and swamps of Cerrejón was a turtle called Carbonemys caffrini, literally coal turtle, roughly the size of a small car, with a skull about as big as a regulation NFL football and jaws powerful enough to crack open the shells of crocodile relatives. Speaking of which, sharing that same water were massive crocodilomorphs like Acherontosuchus, stretching up to 20 feet, about as tall as a full-grown giraffe if you stood it on its tail. Discovering that entire ecosystem, not just one enormous snake, gave scientists their first detailed look at how nature rebuilt itself and found a new balance after one of the biggest catastrophes in the planet's history. So yeah, this snake will never bite you. It's never going to show up in your backyard, and it's definitely not becoming anyone's pet. It's been gone for 60 million years. But it did something arguably more important. It helped us understand just how much Earth's climate has actually shifted over time, and just how tightly the size of a living thing is tied to the world it lives in. So, with enough warming, do you think nature could grow something like this again? Drop a comment, let's talk about it. Subscribe if you want to know more about the most incredible creatures that have ever crawled across this planet, living or extinct. Next episode, we're back to snakes that are still alive today. This has been Snake Insider. See you next time.